All right. Good morning, everyone. We're just about a minute early. Normal kind of log in and get going. We'll give folks a moment that are waiting on the line to dial in. We'll do proper introductions and start promptly at the top of the hour. Um, if you're seeing me and Kaleem Clarkson here, we're excited to have you this morning. You may be wondering where I am. I'll explain that in a moment. Um, perfect, perfect intro for the remote work debate. So excited
Yeah.
to have everyone here with us this morning. And if you're dialing in from all over, please use the chat feature and tell us where you're from. We'll take a question or two as we get going. So give us just a couple seconds here and kind of get rolling full speed. So great to have the third installment. And here we go. Great to have the third installment of our Top Voice Tuesday. I'm here with the incredible Kaleem Clarkson. Kaleem and I met a couple months ago. He is a remote work expert, and given where we are in this day and age, it just seemed perfect to have him on at this time. And if you're wondering where I am, I'm currently in a hotel room in Los Angeles, California. So, what better place to be for a remote work discussion than working remotely in a hotel room? Good to see you there, Michael. Kaleem, why don't you do a proper introduction of yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background, and we'll jump in.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much for having me. I hope you're safe out there in LA.
Yeah.
I hope you're by a contained area. But yeah, my name is Kaleem Clarkson. I'm the CEO of Blemmy Inc. We provide part-time, interim, or contract-based HR services for remote and now hybrid companies. So we've been talking about remote work since 2013, and obviously now we're a little bit more in the middle of the conversation, should we say?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, because this is a top voice conversation, I would love to just have you describe your top voice journey. How did you get to be a top voice? And then we're going to jump into this discussion about remote work.
How did I? That's a good question. How did I become a top voice? I get this question a lot, and my answer is I have no idea. Okay, I have no idea how I became a top voice. What I would say is, things don't happen by accident. I will say that.
Yeah,
Again, ever since attending DrupalCon Denver in 2012, shout out to Drupal open source community. I've just been just addicted to this concept of working remotely and being location independent.
yeah,
So so we have been talking about remote work. We have been talking about location independence. We love the term telework, and we've been posting about it since 2013. So I would say that keep speaking about what it is that you want to be an expert in, and keep posting.
yeah,
And I would say that's probably the best advice that I could give as far as being
yeah.
selected as a top voice, and also publish on your own website, not just on LinkedIn. Although publishing on LinkedIn is great, of course.
Yeah, yeah. That's and we're going to jump in a second, but I'll just share for other folks that maybe this is their first time. Like you, I picked one thing to write about. I write about change. I write about transformation. I've been a part of the organizational change management community for a long time, and a couple years ago, I just decided I was going to drive a hole through the middle of this conversation and start talking about these topics in a different way, consistent repetition, posting regularly, and that's a big piece of it. And it sounds like you've been doing that even longer. And this discussion about remote work, I think, is more relevant than ever. So you are a shining beacon for people who are trying to figure out where we are. So let's talk about where we are. And
Mm,
you know, I'm a consultant. We've been working remotely all over the world for a long time. And in a lot of ways, this conversation feels like it's just catching up. But for the average worker who's been going to an office and has gone through this experience, just where are we in the debate? How would you
mm.
characterize the conversation right now? We know COVID, that's kind of done, and we're in this new world. What is this new world? And characterize that for us.
Yeah, I mean that's a loaded question, Michael. It's a loaded question. Before I answer that, though, I remember getting I remember getting the message from LinkedIn, like, we'd like for you to be a top voice. And I thought that ish was spam. I
Yeah.
thought it was a spam email because I was like, what, LinkedIn top voice? I never heard of this.
Yeah.
I thought it
Yeah.
was a spam email. So always check your emails because
That's
they
right.
could look like spam. But when I actually dug deeper, I was like, oh, the person actually works at LinkedIn.
That's
So
right. That's right. That's a great,
hilarious,
yeah.
hilarious story there.
Yeah. That's a great tip.
So Mike, I think where I would kind of like to start is like remote work has gone through a whole bunch of emotions, should we
Right.
say,
Right.
since 2020. But I do feel like the challenge that a lot of people are having, who are remote work advocates, um, is that we're only looking at this from a small picture of 2020 and on.
Mm.
So I've had the opportunity to speak to the wonderful Jack Nillis. Look him up. He is who we call the godfather of telework. He coined the phrase telework in 1965.
Wow.
So he's the man. So look him up. He coined it because he was actually doing some research on the oil OPEC crisis. So the reason why I was saying all this is that we have to look at where remote work started
Right.
and where it is today to have a true context of how much of an impact the pandemic had. Prior to the pandemic, remote work was just like slowly going up. About 0.4% of the workdays in 1960 were working remotely.
Wow.
But when you look at like this chart, and I'll send you some graphics, Michael, that you could share with the audience so they can view these. But shout out to Nick Bloom. He does some great research on work from home research team. But when you look at his chart from like 1980, it's like 0.6% of the days. Then it's going up to 1995, 2.2. It's slowly going up. Even when we're having our own little recessions, remote
Right.
work is constantly going up. So then you're around like 6.8% around 2015. So 6.8% of the workdays were being done remotely. Then the pandemic happens. So we're at about 6.8% roughly prior to the pandemic. It skyrockets to about 61% during the pandemic,
Wow.
which is insanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is it's 50 years of
Of growth
progression
in 6 months.
one day. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But today, if you keep looking at the curve, it's just hovering at 27% still.
Mm.
Still hovering that. So I'd like to start there when we want to talk about where we at today. We are 5 times more remote,
Right.
5 or 6 times more remote than prior to the pandemic. So that's definitely where we are today from an overall perspective.
Yeah,
So
and it's interesting, but as you say that, and I didn't know that stat. We have a question in the chat about legal requirements, and we're going to get to that. Just so you know,
mm, mm,
I've seen that, but there's this interesting comparison of, again, I'm going to use my consulting experience, which is unique, but we're 5 times greater than before the pandemic, but 3 times less than during the pandemic, which is an
correct.
interesting relative experience about, kind of where we are and how dramatic is this
Mm,
conversation. So
ah,
so one of the things about, I remember this conversation very distinctly with a partner in the company I was working for years ago. And I live in Sacramento, and I used to live in LA, and I moved to Sacramento, and I was like, hey, I want to live there. It doesn't matter. We fly wherever we need to for clients. And we had this debate, and he was like, we have a business model. You need to be in a big city. And I was like, why? None of my clients are,
why?
I'm everywhere all the time, right? Monday through Thursday, I'm with a client or traveling to or from a client. Friday, I'm in the office, maybe not, and we all still just keep functioning, right? And so it's this really interesting mindset of, we have a business model, and that business model kind of requires us to be there. So let's talk about the business model conversations and the return
Yeah.
to office
Oh my gosh.
mandates. So
Yes.
so where are we with, what percentage of companies are asking people to come back? Which ones don't care? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. I would say the return to office headlines are huge right now.
Right.
Like that's what we're seeing in the news.
Right.
Return to office. Amazon's return to office.
Yeah.
AT&T then falls, return to office. JP Morgan, Chase, return to office. In
Yeah.
fact, I believe yesterday President Trump
Yesterday, just signed an order
signed
to go back
a
to the
new
office.
order to require all federal employees terminate remote work arrangements, managers, and he's calling it the executive order called "Return to In-Person Work."
Yep.
So we're seeing this all over the area, all over the industry. The challenge is the data and the research just aren't backing up the headlines.
Right.
So for every huge headline that we're seeing, there's 4 or 5 headlines that we're not seeing. And we all know, look, remote work has been politicized. It
Yeah.
has.
Yeah.
It really has. Obviously, we're just seeing, President Trump just signed an order. You have Dodgy trying to end remote work, to be more efficient. But the reality is that the industry in itself is not following suit. I love this research study. It's brand new. Like, I think Zoom just released it at the end of December of
Mhm.
24. But they talk about like small organizations, mid-level organizations, and large corporations. Something like 69%, nearly 70% of like mid-sized corporations are hybrid.
Yeah.
But you're not seeing that in the news, right? You're not seeing,
Right.
oh, this company has announced this sticking with hybrid. You're not seeing those announcements. Only 15% total
Yeah.
15% are requiring in office. So when you add hybrid and remote, so I think 16% are remote, 69% are hybrid, and then like 15% are fully in office. That's 85% of mid-sized companies are having some sort of flexibility.
Yeah. So,
So
so why do
yes,
you think? Why do you think? And again, I'm going to get to the question. Why do you
yeah.
think that is? Why do you think that it is? It because they're the big players, the big companies? Is it because it makes the good headline? Why do you think that? It's sort of like, well, I'm not going to go into it. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that those headlines get such press?
Well, I mean, it's because it's a net conflict. Conflict works. We've learned this unfortunately over the past 12
Yeah.
years in these elections. Conflict really work. Conflict really drives headlines. And when you have a subset, you have employees, a majority of employees want to have some sort of remote work. In fact, 95%. 95% of
Yeah.
employees want some version of remote work, whether that's fully remote or hybrid. 95%.
Yeah.
So then you have a majority of the population of working population wants one thing, and then you have employers who want another thing. So those are natural friction.
Yeah.
But when you have these headlines and you have these return to offices, you're going to have a lot of people click. Now, what I will say, what I'm finding interesting is what I'm finding is these forced returns, they're not going very well. We're hearing reports from Amazon that they didn't have enough desk space. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
One of the most data-driven companies in the world. Are you kidding me? Like, that's kind of embarrassing. Like,
Right. Right.
basically built on quick delivery and
Right.
like, you have the best data in the world. Like,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do you not have enough desk space?
Right.
Same situation with AT&T. So you're just hearing, in fact, the AT&T report, people are stealing stuff. People are stealing stuff. Employee theft is high.
Wow.
There's fights over desk space.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not happening the way I think a lot of these leaders are hoping for it to go. And I would say, what are some of the driving factors? There are so many different things. Who knows what could be driving the reasons why? Because the data supports productivity and what the employees want. It all supports that we should be doing remote work.
Yeah.
But something Dr. Gleb, you have to take a look at Dr. Gleb. What he talks about is status quo bias.
Mm.
Like this idea of, and I mean, Michael, I mean, you talk about change,
Yeah.
better than anybody. This idea of change and the fact that most executives today earn their stripes in a certain model,
Right.
moving up through the ranks, doing these certain things.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, during the pandemic, we asked them, forget about all those things that you learn, how you got yourself to success. We want you to rewrite the playbook.
Yeah.
And change like that, Michael, is very difficult. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on change like that? Like, what are your reasonings there?
So it's something that I talk about in my book. So my book was released last week. It's been a week. It's been a very productive week. Thank you for everyone who's checked it out. Um, I use this example in the book to talk about one of the big drivers of change is shifts in our environment, right? And you mentioned Zoom, and if you look at the Zoom usage at the inflection point of the pandemic, it was like daily usage was up like 20,000% or some crazy number, right? Because they're
Mm,
just, people understood that this was the only reality. And when we have constraints to our behavior, we have to adjust and we have to shift and we have to move in ways, right? We couldn't be in the office. So I remember people not wanting to go on video because they were just socially or,
yep.
emotionally
Right.
fearful of this idea of being on video. And people are like, I never go on video. And now it's just like a normal thing. I never, it's weird if someone's on a call on a computer and I don't see them, right? So,
Right. Right.
so there's a bit of an emotional, I think, reaction. And I think your comment about the model is really important. And so I want to get to this question. It's a little bit of a tangent, but it's relevant. How much in these return to work mandates, like
Mm,
legally, what's the framework of what companies can do and can't do in those mandates? Do they have any requirements? Do they have to provide certain things? Can they just say it? Does it matter? I've got an
mm.
employment contract. It's usually at will, so I can leave if I want. Like, what is that framework of legality in this conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, anytime we're talking about legal, Michael, we have to put up the disclaimer. I am not an attorney. I only play one on TV.
Yeah,
So every law, every state
of
is
course.
different, which I think is also a challenge, right? I think that has been a big challenge for most businesses because every law in every state can be different.
Yeah,
Um, but generally speaking, and this is a huge generalization, again, a huge generalization. I have to say that employers have all the right to require you to come back into the office
right,
at
right.
any moment, which is kind of a bummer, but it's just the truth of the matter. They can require you the next day to come into the office, even if you are hired as remote. Now,
Yeah,
if you have an employment contract that says you are being hired as a remote employee,
different story.
you have a
Yeah,
little bit more to stand on.
yeah.
But as an HR person, like we're just going to do a reduction in force. Then we're just going
Mm,
to do a riff.
right.
So can it help you? Yeah, but I mean, there's obviously ways organizations can get around that, right?
Yeah,
Like, we have to cut in places. This is a reduction in force, so we're cutting
yeah,
all of our remote employees, and so there's really ways around it. So
yeah,
there isn't too much an employee could do. Now, I will say this is all outside of um, special needs. If you have a special needs benefit, and you need that for your work environment,
yeah,
that's where we're going to start seeing some cases. So where I don't feel confident that people trying to use special needs as a way to stay working remotely. I don't think that will work so great. But
mm,
people who truly need it, I have a feeling that they're going to
yeah,
have ADA compliance. I have a feeling that those people, people in wheelchairs, they're not going to have a way around those laws necessarily.
yeah, yeah. So it's a great segue to, well, two things, but um, what do you think? Part of this debate is about what people believe we can do remotely and what we
Mm,
can't do remotely. Now, I will
mm,
tell you, as a coach and as people, I do workshops, I do things. There are some things that I believe they require us to be together, right? I mean, I coach sports. You can't play football virtually. There's certain
right.
things that happen together. And I think part of this debate has gotten into an always and never kind of orientation. We should always
Mm,
be together. We don't ever need to be together, right? Those
right.
kind of dramatic overstatements.
Yeah.
What is it that you think like we can do and we can't do together or remotely? I would love your point of view on that.
Yeah. So obviously I'm a little bit you know, uh I'll say I don't know, I'll say jaded, I guess, towards remote work or whatever, or
Yeah, you're
influence. Let's use
biased.
that.
Yeah,
I'm biased. Let's do that. I'm biased. Um, I don't think that from a professional standpoint, I don't think that there's anything you can't do remotely. I think we've proved this. Besides touch a product,
right.
like that's literally the only thing that you can't. We haven't gone that far yet, although we've gone pretty close with 3D printing and things like that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we've gotten pretty close. But as far as touching a product, a physical product, that's pretty much the only thing.
yeah,
From an employee perspective, like, from a people operations and culture perspective, if you're talking about that, we've been able to accomplish all of those things, and
yeah,
we've been able to experience that. What I would say is this, though. Um, we're social beings, man.
yeah,
Like, we are not hedgehogs, right? We are designed to be, we're a tribal species,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We grew up in tribes. So even me as a remote worker, a remote work expert, a remote work advocate, when the pandemic happened, I couldn't stand remote work
mhm,
because it didn't allow me to connect where I always were able to connect with people. It didn't allow
yeah,
me to make that human connection.
yeah,
So I do believe there are things that are better in person, of course. I think that you can sit next to a person and not say one word, and there's this magic energy. I can
yeah,
sit next to you, Michael, and not speak to you the whole day and work, but there's something transferring that I can't put my finger on. I'm not going to say it's
yeah,
going to make me more productive or it's making me a better human being or anything, but there is some sort of transfer of something when we're there together.
yeah.
Um, so
It's
yeah,
I love that what you just said, which is it's not that we can't do these things. It's just some things are maybe better, faster.
yeah,
Look, I in right before the holiday, I ran two workshops, one of them in person and one of them virtually. The one in person was great. It was an all day session. We had people in the room. We were on whiteboards, and it was super easy. I had flip charts. You can read the room. You can feel the energy. I can move between experiences and connect things, and you just have to turn your head and point and do all that.
yeah.
I will say the workshop we did virtually with a colleague of mine. We did it all in Mural, and it was with a group of executives. This whole project has been completely virtual. I've never met any
Hmm.
of these people in person,
Hmm.
and it took more work to design the experience. Right? How do I want to walk them through this
Yeah.
virtual whiteboard? How do I need to teach them what to do? There's a little bit of a hiccup in that experience, but we got done. And this is not me congratulating myself. I'm just sharing an example of. They
Hmm.
said this is one of the best workshops they've ever been a part of, but to prepare for the in person, was about this big. To prepare for the virtual was about this big, but they
Right.
both ended up being great experiences. And so
Mm,
I
mm.
think that's a great takeaway for people on the phone is, get out of these absolutist kind of conversations, right? Can it be faster? Can it be better? Can it be stronger? Can it be quicker, easier, whatever? But it's all possible, I think, is what we're hearing from you.
100%. And Michael, you know why people enjoyed that workshop? Because they're different people. Everyone's different.
Right,
So you had some people in that workshop online. You can control where they break out into breakout groups.
right, right.
You can control the amount of time. You can control who's raising their hand, who's speaking too much, and who's speaking too little.
Yeah,
So there are things that you can do in a remote environment that can help facilitate the information better. And that's why you see the highest productivity rates from Dr. Bloom when it's hybrid,
right.
because when you're remote, you have to be intentional. You have
I
to
love that.
implement so much intentionality when you're working remotely. It takes a lot of time to design the workshop, like you said. Ooh, I got
Right.
to think about the chat. I have to think about whether people can read the font size, right? I have to
Yep.
think about how many people to break out in the breakout groups, right? Like all of these things are intentional, But because they're intentional, you're thinking about those things. And I think that's the biggest difference. In a remote setting, it's going to take more preparation, more intention, versus like in person, you can kind of fly by the seat of your pants. But I will say this, Michael, if you add an in-person component to a hybrid, to a online workshop,
Yeah.
then you want to talk about the magic.
Right.
Because what that does is it allows people to connect virtually first. You're able to actually focus because you actually need, people don't know this, but like brainstorming is great, but you actually need focus time to actually focus.
Yeah.
So like being in a group of people, everyone's like, oh, we got a whiteboard. This is great. It's great, but you actually do most of your focus time like alone.
Right.
So you need to focus. Then you bring people together to engage in conversation and share the ideas that they've already thought about.
Yeah.
That's where the magic happens. It's where
Yeah. This phrase of intentionality, I think, is so good. I know we have a few minutes. We might go a few minutes over because I got two more questions. So
okay.
folks want to hang in with us, please do. And if you have questions in the chat, please put them in. I think this is really
Put
great.
them in the chat. Put them
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
chat.
that's right. I never thought I'd be someone who says this, but apparently now I am. So, um, this idea of intentionality, I'm going to take it back to the return to work request and the mandate, and the I
Yep.
just want you here. I remember this justification of, well, we don't get the water cooler conversations. Right.
Yes.
That's the big, yeah, that's the big
Mhm.
aphorism that people use to
Yes.
describe the fact that just come back and be here because there's magic. But I, I'm someone who works in human behavior. Do you know the magic in human intentionality when I'm thinking very specifically about what I'm doing, why I'm here, what I want you to experience with me, right? And I don't want to call it lazy because that's unfair to say, but
Yes.
there's a there's a there's a simplicity to the belief that just being next to each other is enough. I think what you're describing is be intentional in every experience that you have. Now when I see people, I'm much more intentional about enjoying their time because it's like, well, we get to be together and this and that, as opposed to, oh, you're just here, we'll be here tomorrow. I'm gonna, scroll on the internet for 3 hours, right? Whatever it may
Yes.
be. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so are employees voting with their feet? What are we
Mm.
seeing in the talent
Mm.
migration of people that just say, I'm not going back, I'll find a different job?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think right now the market has shifted. And what I mean by that is the job market. It's not
Yeah.
as easy to get a job as it was maybe at one
Yeah.
point in the pandemic where
Right.
salaries were exploding, companies were hiring like hundreds of people because everybody was going online. So you could not pay a website developer enough money to go on site during the peak of the pandemic.
Right. Right.
That was basically impossible, right? But now that the market's kind of shifted the other way, you're seeing, you know, people are kind of watching their paycheck a little bit more.
Yeah.
Executives know this, so they are requiring it a little bit more. But do not fake the funk. If you're not Google, if you're not Amazon, which most of us business owners are not,
Right.
as soon as you require that mandate, they are looking for another job. They're doing that quiet quitting. Quiet quitting is back.
Yeah.
Now, how quickly are they quitting? How
Right.
quickly are they quitting? Not as quick as before, but they are preparing to quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not only that, but like there's a bunch of studies. I think a Gartner study recently said 1 out of 5 people would quit. And then when you ask executives, that this is the part, the kicker. When you ask executives if you're going to take away their ability to work remotely, 1 in 3 said that they're going to quit.
Wow.
1 in 3 executives said if you're not going to let me work remotely, I'm going to quit. And I believe we had an example of this from in 2022. What's his name? The director of machine learning at Apple, Ian Goodfellow. Imagine you're trying to launch the Apple Intelligence on the Apple on your
Right.
new
Yeah.
iPhone. You know what I mean? You're like, yeah, we're gonna do this. Oh, by the way, everyone coming to the office, Yeah, the director of machine learning just raised their hand and was like, nah, son, I'm not coming in ever again.
Right.
Like that
Well,
is
there's this also this interesting. I actually wrote an article about this not long ago, which is, some of these return to work mandates are driven by the desire to shrink the workforce because I know people will leave, right? There's an intentionality to, I'm going to ask everyone back, people are going to leave. The problem is you can't control who leaves. And it's the
right.
people that have prospects in the open in a tough market, you're losing top talent potentially. And so there's a little game here, right? Of, do I want to, are they going to call my bluff, right? And what does that mean in terms of the talent migration, which is a whole separate thing. So I
Yeah,
know we're at time.
it's definitely happening. No, Michael, I got to answer this one question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We're going to keep going. You're going to have to edit it. So sorry.
No, no,
Sorry.
no, no. I just want to make
So,
sure you see the question. This
yeah,
is
yeah.
great.
So the question in the chat was versus the demand of return to work, return to office, or else. Is there a way to communicate why you need your team together in the office, i.e., a company that needs to pivot to improve performance, and maybe they need to improve culture? So this is a really good question. Thank you, LinkedIn user. Um, this what we advise companies, Michael, like, and that's what we're advising on people operations. How do you blend your people and your operations to produce the product or service that you need? How do you blend
Right,
those together? Be honest.
right.
So specifically to this question, if you were not tracking culture with some measurable metric prior to the pandemic,
Yeah,
then
preach.
do not come out and say that this is about culture. Don't do that,
Yeah,
because you don't have anything to prove that.
yeah,
So I think this is where most employees are having the biggest problem,
right.
right? Tell me the truth. If it's we need to be in the office because we have this space, it's not utilized, and basically our shareholders want us to utilize a sunk piece of cost of property that we got to utilize, we got to do it. Our shareholders want us back. You know what? The mayor, the local government, they
Yeah,
want us to come back into downtown so that we can help our local bakeries and our local small businesses. Like, we help drive revenue. If you're going to do it, just do it for the true reasons and
yeah,
tell the truth. And I think that's the piece of advice that we would give. Do not come out here and say, oh, it's all about the culture, we're going back to it,
yeah,
because every employee has a piece of paper that shows how well they've performed over the past 5 years now, right? Like, they got it.
yeah.
So it's not performance, and it's most likely not culture, because most of the organizations we're not measuring culture. If you have that culture number, then just show it and say our culture numbers have dropped and we need to do better.
Right,
There you go.
right.
And
There's
that's
this
it.
interesting piece of what if you've ever been to business school, you've heard of the Porter's five forces model, which is, the power of suppliers and all of this, right? It's all these. And I remember years ago saying that there's five. I remember saying there was a sixth one, which is the power of employees, right? And employees, up until recently, I mean, I think, but more than ever, have more individual choice and power. And I'm not talking necessarily unionized collectives, but I just mean the choice of individual employees. And this conversation about, be honest with me, be upfront, tell me what's needed, and then I can make an informed
Trust.
choice, right? And
Trust.
yeah, and so then I can sort of trust what's happening around me. And I think, someone who works in the culture space and helps companies build culture, I'm going to use a word you used earlier, which is, the best cultures are built intentionally. They're
Mhm.
not just cultures that happen because we all happen to be around each other. Yes,
Right.
a culture will form itself if you just put a bunch of people in a group. But
Mhm.
those cultures that are curated with a clear description of who we are, why we're here, what we're doing, and all of that, those are the cultures that really can sort of transmit and replicate and be strong. And so, I just love this conversation. For those of you that hung on with us a few minutes early, I've got one more
Okay,
question.
let's do it.
Yeah,
The
for
magic
Kaleem,
question. The magic
and
question.
this is the bonus question. So
Okay.
so
Okay.
this is, as I said before, the last guest leaves a question for the next guest.
Okay.
And the thing that we want to know is, so what was a moment in your work life, that sort of pissed you off so much that you knew you had to do something radical? and transform yourself in some way?
Well, it was when my brother told me I was no damn coder. That's what it was. So I'm a former front end engineer.
Yeah.
I was working for a company out of Providence. Shout out to doing some Drupal work. And my brother called me up out of the blue. It was April of 20. And he was like, "What the hell are you doing coding in a room by yourself?
Wow.
Your name Kaleem, that means speaker. You need to get out there and tell people
I love
this
that.
thing about remote work." So that
Yeah.
was the moment when my brother called me up, told me I was no damn coder and to use my superpower, and that's speaking. So I was pissed off, but he was right.
I love that. What a gift. What a gift. Well, Kaleem, thank you. I mean, by the way, Kaleem, have we ever been in the same room together?
No, not at all.
Not once. And
We'll
this
make it
is,
happen.
yeah, but like, this is an example, right, of what is possible. And so, from the minute we met,
Everything is possible.
from from the minute we met, I knew that this was something special. So I'm going to give you the last word, Kaleem. Anything you'd like to offer up to folks that are attending and listening? I know you have a few things that you do that are important, so I'm going to give you that space, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, please follow me on LinkedIn. I love to share videos and fun content. So please definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. And then we have what we call our remote employee experience assessment on our website. So go to blendmeinc.com and take the assessment. If you just want to get on there and see how well your organization is working remotely and what that employee experience is like, it's free. You fill out a few questions, you get a little score back, and if you want to chat and talk about your results, you can always reach out.
That's great. Thank you, Kaleem. Thanks for everyone for hanging in. Just in case I didn't say this, but I'm, shameless plug. Please go get a copy. My book came out last week.
Yes,
Super happy
yes.
about it. It's doing well so far, and just really, really happy. We talked about a little bit of it there, and I've got a YouTube channel up that is going to put these little episodes on, so you can go back and watch those at Michael J. Lopez 9. So, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Tuesday. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Kaleem. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you.